It didn't have to be this way. It really didn't have to be. Hey folks, MasakoX here. Now, the Goku Black Saga is probably one of the best arcs of Dragon Ball Super. And don't worry, this isn't some kind of faint praise or a backhanded compliment or anything like that. This does carry some weight. Prior to episode 66 of Super, I'd have rated this arc a solid 8 out of 10. It did have some high drama, it had a lot of dark moments in it, and Trunks got a power which ultimately was enough, despite it being a bit weird and ludicrous. It did get the win. Of course, it didn't turn out that way, but that's for another video. We hope for better. Hey, you know, it was still a pretty big plus that Goku wasn't the one to get the final blow. He didn't even do so much on his own, actually, save for that one punch that turned a few Zamasu into raspberry jam on legs. Why couldn't it just stay like that? But that's not the hardest thing to understand about Dragon Ball Super today. It is the hardest thing to come to terms with, though, but again, that's for another time. Oh, that Dragon Ball Super. It's a very mixed bag indeed. It had some pretty good highs, and the music has come to be some of the best in the series, especially the Broly soundtrack. Dang, it's good. But it then stumbled over such quaint materials. It made such simple things such as the Dragon Ball timeline itself super complicated. But granted, we did have a mild headache of this back in Z, with Cell's explanation of time travel and the like, but that is a walk in the park, at the time, when you compare it to the likes of what the latest series has done. But wait, it gets even more complicated than you think. For example, did you know that before Super, there were already 5 separate timelines in the Dragon Ball world? Now, before you assume that Super was the one to blame for these additional timelines, Super actually only added, like, 2 direct extra ones? Of course, that's at first glance those 2. You should know by now that Hav and I like to delve a little deeper into such matters. So today, we are going to be navigating through the confusing world of the Dragon Ball wibbly-wobbly timey-wimey stuff that we've sort of become desensitized to because we've looked at these videos for nearly 5 years. But okay, pop quiz. How many known timelines would you say there are in Dragon Ball Z? Not Super, just Z. Well, yeah, it's obvious, Masako. There are 3. There's the main one where the characters we know live, there's the Future Trunks one, and there's Perfect Cell's one. It's that simple. But is it really that simple, folks? I will admit that before Hav presented his initial findings to make this script, I thought the same thing. Boy, was I wrong. And I have come to realize that the stark truth about time here is upon us. Think about it. Let's go a little deeper here. Trunks, who was whomped by Cell in the latter's timeline, had already solved the android problem. Trunks was only dispatched on his victory lap in that particular timeline, and that future turned out okay, still, since Cell abandoned it when he went back in time after killing Trunks. But what does that mean? Well, that means that there is a 4th timeline present. A second one, where the androids had been beaten, but the successful Trunks who returned from this timeline had been obliterated by Cell. But that's not all. In the episode His Name is Cell, we learn that Mr. Perfect Cell's own timeline is a combination of both the main timeline, it still had Future Trunks defeating King Cold and Frieza in it, but in his series of events, Goku still dies because of the heart virus regardless of the medicine, and Gohan has to be the one to train Trunks. So it's like History of Trunks and Dragon Ball Z still happened at the same time. This is of course the same Trunks, mind you, that he later takes the time machine from. But that leaves us with one more Trunks to consider here. The one that defeated King Cold and Frieza, but never seemingly returned to that timeline again. The time rings in Super explain that with every major action in history, messed about with of course by time travel, it creates an alternate reality, and thusly, a new time ring. This means that Trunks must have come from a 5th timeline. And that leaves us with a couple of interesting questions regarding those 2 lesser known timelines. Is Goku still alive in timeline 4? Did they manage to destroy their version of Cell in the end, after he woke up from his recovery from the virus? Or did they find the sublab and prevented him from emerging in the first place? We're really not entirely sure about that, as this timeline has not really been tackled in mainstream media. But let's suppose for argument's sake, if they have both scenarios correctly happening, as we've conveyed to you, this might have been the best timeline in terms of victims and simplicity. The least collateral damage occurred. But that being said, it's completely unknown how they would deal with Boo though, because as far as time travel is concerned, it all comes to a screeching halt after movie 9 and after the Cell Saga. Everything, it's completely forgotten about. But one of the biggest questions for us though is, what happened to the 5th future Trunks, as he is the only Trunks that is not accounted for in any sort of media whatsoever? Why didn't he return to the future to either regroup or stop the androids? Or why did he not return back into the past again? Did Cell get to him before he had the chance to do any of this? Did he accidentally go to the wrong future? The time machine then acting up and completely derailing his mission, making him stranded in some other dimension that he cannot get back from or escape? Unfortunately, we're probably never going to know the full story. Without, of course, making a what-if out of it in the fullness of time. I mean, it's certainly possible. Let me know down in the comments if you'd be interested. But the first option would suggest the evidence of a 6th timeline, in which Cell could have won outright, getting what he wanted. Perfection. But then again, settling for a mere suggestion of a timeline is nowhere near enough for us. And since we're dealing with only the anime manga material, and nothing like Xenoverse or even GT, since it didn't occur at the time of the Cell Saga's creation, we are left with this supposition, that one missing Trunks, and us unaware of the fates of 2 Cells. Which means that we might have 2 defeated Cells out there, or 2 completely fine ones, roaming around the timelines causing potentially large amounts of trouble, one of them with a time machine. Ooh, yikes. But there are 2 more official timelines to consider that have now appeared within Super. We're going to get back to those. Let's examine them as well, shall we? Don't worry, you can always pause the video to process what we're about to consider here. At least you're lucky. Our timeline 6 for this case study will be the original timeline of Goku Black, and it's basically a copy of timeline 1. The main difference start in age 779, when Zamasu kills Goasu and steals his time ring, and steals Goku's body, and then goes off to hatch his plan for multiversal domination, the Zero Mortal Plan. We all know that bit. Of course, we may argue that this timeline is actually just timeline 1 and not timeline 6. It's nothing like a whole new creation, due to the fact that its creation had caused future Trunks from timeline 2 to return and warn the Z Fighters of Goku Black, thus creating a new timeline. But also, we cannot be sure for that matter if Super is still timeline 1, and that the future Trunks we see there is still our future Trunks from timeline 2. I mean, we assume he is for simplicity's sake, and we've not been told otherwise, but that's the moment things start to get not only more confusing, but it actually causes your head to hurt. But hey, there's a plus here. It might explain why this Trunks' hair is blue and not lavender. You didn't think about that now, did you? I'm actually getting myself into a fit here, but okay, let's calm down. If we assume that timeline 6, the Goku Black one, is its own thing, we still have to account for 2 more timelines. Let's call them 8 and 9 for the moment. One for their future Trunks and their perfect Cell, since everything was identical up to age 779. And then we get even more confused and befuddled with timeline 7, the one when Trunks and Mai travel to, for some reason, to which we are still nettled with to this day. In the anime, it's created by Whis from timeline 1, telling Beerus from timeline 7 to deal with Zamasu, also of timeline 7. In the manga, it actually happens a little differently. It's Trunks and Mai from timeline 2, preventing the death of Shin from timeline 7, and thusly completely changing the events in a slightly more succinct manner. Only slightly though. But if you think we're absolutely okay with this, then maybe not. Hold your horses there. This gives us yet another 2 timelines, 10 and 11, for future Trunks and Cell. As you might be able to tell from us having to add these little caveats, it's getting really convoluted. And of course it is. The fact that Toei and Shueisha had to put out official flowcharts as the arc was airing of the timelines for Super to its audience to help explain it to them, that's quite telling. That shouldn't have had to happen. Ideally, the audience should be able to figure it out for themselves. Or, if need be, the audience could collectively help one another figure it out, solve it, provide videos like these to then clarify, and people just go, oh okay, yeah, that makes sense, but no, they had to make an official diagram. But anyway, we're rambling. Now, because the Goku Black Saga has incorporated 2 different ways of looking at time travel in this arc alone, somehow in Dragon Ball using both multiverse theory and directly changing the past using the time rings, they also actually don't. Not really. which makes the whole thing even more bizarre. If you want to get really silly, there could be one timeline out there where Goku Black fails to get the time ring working at all, and our main present timeline never sees him at all. Or you could go one further than that Goku Black still does go back into the past, but he gets stuck there. There are so many splintering narratives to consider here. There are probably endless possibilities to be had here, but the fact that we can easily pinpoint 11 timelines used by the main story to explain the overall plot, that's bonkers. We've essentially doubled the count of timelines from just one arc. Also, we can say, if it'll make you feel any better or able to comprehend the matter, that the manga and GT versions of the stories are their own timelines now, and that every movie, except Dragon Ball Super Broly, which is even more confusing due to it being canon in the anime and the manga, and maybe also Dead Zone in the anime canon, okay, BoJack as well, are their own little worlds, free from the constraints of the main dimension. Also everyone's favourite Bardock special, that's safe from the Conundrum too. You see, time travel in media can be fun, if done right, and in a manner which doesn't give people concussion with how it hurls people about so much. As a result, we feel that in the main series of Dragon Ball, there is really only one way to go about this to save yourself stressing out over it. The less you think about it, the better off you'll be. That or just stick to the games. We actually feel that Xenoverse deals with this really well, explaining time travel through scrolls which have concrete points in time. They're tangible, they're physical, they've got a weight to them. You just grab a scroll and go. Simple. Scrolls can be rewritten, but the physical artifact remains. You do not question it because it comes from the Supreme Kai of Time, because you don't have to. It's just there. And quite frankly, we think that after so many weird twists and turns, maybe it's for the best for time travel in general that Dragon Ball just forgets about it, or keep it to the video game domain from now on. You know, don't go beyond Trunks simply visiting the past and him no longer messing with the timeline anymore, save from working with the Time Patrol. Hey, it might actually lead to Konoha finally becoming canon. I think a lot of people would like that. Who knows how many Cells and Zamasus are still out there in the multiverse, but it's best not worth contemplating really. That being said though, that may be a material for a what if someday, in all honesty. But it is vital to realise that this problem wasn't started in Dragon Ball Super. It shouldn't bear the brunt for all of this vitriol concerning confuddling people today. It was already quite complex back in Z. We just didn't pay much mind to it back in the day because we were more focused on the fighting. That was the best thing to do, actually, since Toriyama had managed to hide this befuddlement better and shift our attention away from the confusing timelines, just, ooh, look at the punchy people. That's a good job, actually. And this is where Super struggles, and I think this is why we actually associate more timeline conundrums with that. It's due to the fact that, once again, the time slot actually is a detriment. The fighting is a little more sterile and use-centric, no red marks here, and so you have less tools to hide more puzzling things behind. When time rings are actually also a big plot point of your arc, it makes the whole thing that more noticeable and, frankly, confusing. There's no escape from this plot hole, to the point where you have pretty good reasoning in questioning, am I watching the same Goku and friends I said goodbye to back in Z? Or is this a whole completely different cast, a new set of characters, and a whole different Trunks? It could explain why this Goku in Super is far more boneheaded, to be fair. Honestly though, I wouldn't stress out over this. We just don't think that this is a question that you should really bother yourself with in the grand scheme of things, in a shonen series to be perfectly clear. Its main purpose is to entertain. We know that, we really do. This isn't meant to be dissected in this kind of way that we do, but come on. Don't treat your audience like simpletons. Don't leave any of them any opportunity to be puzzled to this extent. If you are writing a time travel story and you hope that your fans won't overanalyze this, then you really are quite naive. I can believe that we have been thinking about that more than any of the Triple T did at any time or place. But that's it. Our simplified analysis of a problem that is far from simple. But what did you folks think? What are your theories about timelines 4 and 5? What happened to both Cells and the missing future Trunks? Leave a comment below and let's get this discussion going. And I shall see you in the next video. Catch you later!